B'Shem Hashem na'aseh v'natzliach, Shiur Torah, Bruchim Habayim. We are back here, Shavua Tov. We're starting a new week, continuing our Jewish HaShkafa series, trying to get a better idea of the holy mind of the Chazon Ish that's going to help us and has been helping us over these last couple of years overcome bad traits, really trying to improve ourselves, get ourselves to a better version of ourselves. A person was born an animal, but certainly he's not supposed to leave this world an animal. BeEzrat HaShem, the shiurim will continue to help each and every one of us get to that point. Tonight's shiur will be for a refuah shlema for Rabbanit Levana bat Sarah, Rav Ephraim ben Shulamit, Rabbanit Sarah bat Anat, Avi Mori David ben Nesria, Imi Morati Doris bat Zora, and also Yonatan ben Gavriel, and also for the Atzlacha Rabbah for Marsha bat Julie and all of Am Yisrael, all of the righteous Noahides, to continue to contribute, continue to watch our shiurim, continue to share these shiurim with different people. So of course, Baruch Hashem, we had a wonderful week last week. A lot of productive things happening, lots of shiurim, lots of chidushim, lots of learning, Baruch Hashem, and we also had two raffles announced, two different ways for people to win, two different ways to encourage people to contribute and get involved, whether it's by subscribing to the YouTube channel or by contributing to the organization or both. And we have our first winner. So we have two things going on. One is that whoever was going to contribute to the Gehinnom movie last week was going to enter an internal raffle that is going to be announced right now of who the winner is, and win our a brand new talit with Torah and also the BeEzrat HaShem bag on it. Really a whole package. That's the talit is $500. This cool BeEzrat HaShem bag with tefillin and talit bag over here is another $150, and the winner is someone that is very dear to me, Baruch Hashem. So it's always nice to see a name that I know. Elchanan Al-Sid. Hashem evarech otcha bekol mikol kol. You are the winner. BeEzrat Hashem, expect a new talit and bag and everything over the next few days, shipped directly to your house. BeEzrat Hashem, you're the winner. You've always been the winner, but you're a winner again, Baruch Hashem. So he's the winner of this talit. That raffle is going to continue. We're going to start a new one tonight. Whoever's going to contribute from today, actually, anyone that already contributed over the last 24 hours, throughout this until the movie itself, until Wednesday, we'll enter the next raffle. We'll actually try to what we'll do. Well, we can't really announce it on. So we'll do. We'll do the raffle until Tuesday. We'll do it until Tuesday, so I can announce it to you guys on Tuesday night, because the movie is Wednesday. So just as an update for everybody, there's no shiur on Wednesday night, because Wednesday night is the big movie. The movie is going to premiere on all of our channels at 8 p.m. BeEzrat Hashem. You could also watch it on bh.live. You could watch it on our new Gehinnom website. Go to gehinnom.org. You'll be able to watch it over there. You could watch it on our app, of course, and of course on YouTube. So that's where that's going to be. Also, for the raffle for the subscribers of YouTube is going to continue. Every 1,000 new subscribers, someone else is going to win something that we'll send them, whether it's going to be something like a USBs or books, a talit, different things that are worth some money, not $5. And we're trying to encourage people to subscribe. Number one, because we know people are already on the internet anyway, so at least if you have more of our shiurim, flashing across your screen, certainly that's going to help you avoid all of the shtiyot, all of the nonsense that's out there. So with that being said, we are going to continue this series and try to figure out a few more pieces of the puzzle that the Chazon Ish has been trying to teach us, one step at a time. Now, last week, we learned about how the Chazon Ish is really giving us an extraordinary chidush, a huge insight about overcoming difficulties when it comes to flaws, character flaws, whether it be anger or arrogance, lack of patience, stinginess, and the list goes on. Every one of us has some flaws, some people more than others. Needless to say, we all have to work on them. And of course, in the world today, you have many gurus and advisors and psychiatrists and therapists and so-called friends and colleagues that have an endless list of suggestions of what you should do to overcome that difficulty, whether it's the people that recommend for you to take on yoga, another form of idolatry, or it's have positive thoughts. If you think good, then good things will happen. That is a nice thing to theoretically, but it's not necessarily always something that works, especially if you're in the middle of a fight with your spouse or you just got fired from your job. Thinking positive thoughts is not exactly the easiest thing to do at that time. Needless to say, the most effective. Some people will recommend for you to exercise. A healthy body is a healthy mind. Although it does have some truth in it, needless to say, at the moment of truth, when you are angry, when you are upset, when someone just did something really bad to you, that's not necessarily going to work. Being in the gym 24 hours a day is not possible for most people. So needless to say, it's not going to affect you all day. Some people recommend listening to comedy. It's always good to have a good laugh, especially if it's not at somebody else's expense. But if you're laughing at other people's expense, certainly this is not comedy. It's just simply making sins and being partners to sins. But nonetheless, comedy is a good thing. To have a good laugh is a good thing, but it's not going to make you forgive your spouse after they betrayed you. It's not going to make you forgive your children after they wrecked the house. It's not going to make you forget your colleague after they cause you to miss a deadline and possibly get fired. So these are things that are nice to have as part of somebody's life, but solutions to the most difficult problems, such as character flaws that are causing marriage problems and all types of relationship problems. Certainly these are not solutions, but nonetheless people can't stop recommending them. One of the common solutions I remember became very popular at the time I was on Wall Street was people going boxing. Just become very violent, express all of your energy on this bag, and as much energy as you put on the bag, you'll become less angry. This is actually the stupidest thing in the world, because it actually does the exact opposite. In fact, the more you express anger, the more you express anger physically, the more angry you become. But of course, you'll have 9 out of 10 psychiatrists, therapists, and all types of other gym fanatics recommend for you to become the next Mike Tyson on the bag and pretend that this is your boss or your wife or your husband or somebody else before you actually end up punching the real person, as a form of getting rid of anger. Some people say just simply make fun of the problems. Make fun of it. Somebody makes fun of you, make fun of them. Somebody annoys you, make fun of them. This is a solution that is a defense mechanism. Many comedians actually use this. Many comedians, you'd be surprised, are actually alcoholics, and not only because they like the actual taste of alcohol initially, but also because it's a form of them getting away from their depression. Even though they make people laugh for a living, they themselves are many times very depressed. Hence stories like the Robin Williams and the likes, people that overdose on drugs. This is not because they laugh all the time. They perhaps are good at making other people laugh, but inside themselves, they're very, very miserable. So making fun of the problems is not necessarily a good solution if track record is worth anything. Other things, a common thing to do that people say is simply ignore the problem. Just ignore it as if it's not happening. Now, of course, we all know that these solutions can sometimes work with certain things, but as an effective, permanent solution, we all know, or at least anyone that's old enough and has tried these knows, these are not necessarily permanent solutions. The Chazon Ish, on the other hand, gave a completely different solution, a solution that's unlike any other psychotherapist, unlike any other analyst, unlike anybody else out there outside of the Torah world. And the Chazon Ish suggests using Halacha, using the law of the Torah as a way to overcome all of the bad traits that a person has, whether it's the bad traits of being prone to depression or anger or arrogance or all types of pride-seeking types of traits that a person has, and on and on. Every one of the character flaws that a person has can be resolved and completely annihilated from the person based on their observance of Halacha. Now, of course, a newly religious person hears this, and this immediately sounds stupid to them. How could me be observing Shabbos going to help me with my anger problems that cause me to beat my wife? How could me observing kashrut going to help me become more generous because I can't even give the dollar that's in my pocket even though the other pocket has 10,000? How can I do this if I do that? So the logic of the regular person out there is literally the opposite of what the Chazon Ish is saying. But needless to say, Chazon Ish knows a lot more than us, and he's explaining to us how this all works. And last week he gave us a tidbit of how this actually works, and we'll go over parts of it now, and then we'll BeEzrat HaShem go into the 9th section of the 4th chapter. So the Chazon Ish says that when a person becomes used to patience, that habit of patience will cure their anger, and in essence going to also cure them taking offense, being offended quickly. Many people are quickly offended. They're so quick to be offended that they don't even realize what the other person said. They simply assume that the other person said 1, 2, 3. Like, for example, I have somebody that's been watching my shiurim for at least a few years, but he saw part of a clip that I made about this moron Kanye West. He only saw the first few seconds, and he immediately concluded that somehow in his wild dreams I was actually a fan of Kanye West and applauding him, which is obviously the exact opposite of what I said and what I've stand for and what I've taught for the last 10 years. Needless to say, he was, instead of watching the whole clip, instead of investigating, he was quick to send me a 2.5-minute rebuke of how terrible I am and how I did this and that, and it's a shame that I did this and it's a shame that I did that. And of course, this goes into the deleted box, but needless to say, it is one of those things where you have to see where did you go wrong? Where did you go wrong? How did this happen? How did you just take several years of lectures that you've watched, that you've learned, that have improved your life, and you've simply thrown all of that into the garbage because you heard something that you disagree with, where even if you were right, which you weren't, how did you just simply throw all of that into the garbage? This is, Rabotai, a nature that's prone to be offended. Prone to be offended. A person is prone to be offended. This is also happening anybody that is following some of the comments, whether it's on TikTok or YouTube or Facebook, by some of these black Israelites, and how they're literally assaulting me with a deadly weapon on the internet. You know, they're just murdering me left and right. They're calling all types of names. I care less. I don't respond to 99% of the comments unless I see some form of wisdom somewhere or somebody that perhaps is seeking the truth. I'll respond if I have a moment. Perhaps maybe 5 comments I've responded to. But needless to say, the immediate response is, you're an idiot, you're a moron, you're a terrorist, you're this, you're that. Just insults. No actual factual information. Nothing with substance. But immediately they are reacting because they were offended. They were offended that I mentioned hot wings. Even though I mentioned shawarma and falafel, which is what we eat, they were offended that I mentioned what they eat, as if it's something offensive. The reality is, Rabotai, is that if a person is prone to be offended, you can't help such a person. So one of the ways that the Chazon Ish is trying to tell us that's going to help a person not become so quick to be offended, not become so angry, is by developing patience. Now, of course, developing patience is a wonderful thing. How do you do it? Even more so, he tells us that if a person has a habit that is lazy, A lazy habit, he's just simply indifferent about things. He's lethargic. He always procrastinates. He's simply one of those people. She's one of those people that she's going to delay things until 2 minutes after the deadline. She studies 1 minute before the test. She realizes she has to get to the appointment only 5 minutes before the appointment. And people have this nature to simply wait and delay and procrastinate and simply be careless about anybody else's time. They're notorious for showing up late. They're notorious for simply not showing up. They're notorious for simply blaming the world for misunderstanding on a regular basis. There's like a chronic case of misunderstanding, a chronic case of miscommunication, a chronic case of I didn't hear you. It's almost like you want to send this person to maybe perhaps some type of medical institution to have their heads checked, but in reality it's not their head, it's their personality. It's a personality flaw that a person has, that they simply are either lethargic, lazy, or simply careless about anybody else but themselves, or a combination thereof. The cure for that, says the Chazon Ish, is the habit of quickness. Being quick to react, where a person is one of these people that's like Avraham Avinu. Hashem told Avraham Avinu, bring your son, the son, the one that you love, Yitzchak, and bring him as a sacrifice. Bring him as a sacrifice. Avraham Avinu didn't hear when. He didn't hear a specific time. But what does the Torah says? Vayakum baboker, and he woke up early in the morning, meaning 4 o'clock in the morning. Avraham Avinu is already on his feet, getting his son Yitzchak on board, and the other two, and they're on to the journey of having his son, his favorite son, his beloved son, slaughtered. So this, of course, is someone that is a lover of Hashem, that is not delaying anything. The same thing we saw with Moshe Rabbeinu, where Kadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu, after this war, you're going to die. What does Moshe Rabbeinu do? Immediately tells everybody, we're going to war. Now Hashem didn't tell Moshe Rabbeinu, you have to go to war now, you have to go to war this week, or you even have to go to war this year. He simply told him, after this war, you're going to die. What does Moshe Rabbeinu do? Oh, the will of Hashem is this war. That's it. The fact that I'm going to die is irrelevant. Why? I have to fulfill a mitzvah. The will of Hashem is for me to go to war right now. And this is the nature of people that are quick to do the will of Hashem, quick to do what is necessary. Of course, one of the greatest things in the world that a person can find in their life, whether it's their spouse, or it's a student, or it's an employee, or anything else, is someone that's quick to react, someone that's constantly on top of their feet, on top of their game to get things done. But this is very, very hard to find, even more hard to find in the current generation than it was in the previous generation, because people are more prone to be the first thing that we mentioned, which is more likely the lazy, the lethargic, the one that's procrastinating, the one that's always late, the one that has a chronic case of everything negative, unfortunately. So there is a cure for that, says the Chazon Ish. There's a cure for that. Even more so, the most critical thing that we heard last week is that the Chazon Ish told us that if a person is seeking honor, which is detested by Hashem, there's a endless amount of verses in the Torah, in the Tanakh, that talks about how Hashem considers a person that seeks honor like an idol worshiper. Because in essence, they're making themselves into an idol worshiper. Toivat Hashem kol gvalev. It's an abomination to Hashem, anyone that is a prideful heart. And there is literally a hatred from above for people that are prideful. Unfortunately, in a world that is absent of Torah knowledge, you see many people looking to become more prideful, looking to become more arrogant, and admiring the arrogant, admiring the conceited, admiring the people that put themselves on a stage, admiring those people that are literally disgusting in the eyes of Hashem. And of course, this is the opposite of the will of Hashem. But needless to say, there is inner inclination in all of us to seek honor in some way or another. We want credit for what we did. We want applause. We want a good job. We want recognition. We want our name on the door. We want our name on the business card. We want everyone to know that we did this and we did that. It's a constant seeking for recognition. And unfortunately, this is one of the things that Hashem detests, and the Chazon Ish says that there is a cure for this. There's a cure for this if a person wants to be beloved by Hashem, if a person wants to be beloved by their spouse, beloved by their children, beloved by the world above and the world below. Beloved, how? This is a person that's not only going to not seek honor, but it's a person that's going to be cured from even desiring honor. What's the cure, says the Chazon Ish? The cure is developing a habit of accepting ridicule, meaning that when people ridicule you, you don't get offended. Not only, it's not just like sitting there and letting people spit on you and you're crying your way home. You cry into your bed and your pillow is full of tears every night because of all the insults. No, it's simply not viewing it as anything. It's like wind. It doesn't matter. It doesn't exist. Now, of course, this is very difficult because most of us want to be the exact opposite. We want the recognition, want everything else. But needless to say, a person needs to aspire to get to these higher levels by starting even with the lower levels. One of the things that a person needs to do is stop looking for recognition. That's an easier thing. That's much easier than perhaps welcoming and acknowledging the fact that the insults, the ridicule, is actually a positive thing. So these few things are obviously things that are not new. It's as old as time, and people have been trying to figure it out in the philosophical world since the time of Plato. Plato himself was one to try to overcome these negative traits, and he was known to be a very big thinker, of course. And one time he was sitting there with his students and thinking deeply about some type of philosophical concept while his wife was trying to get his attention. And his wife is trying to get his attention, and she realizes that he's deep in his thoughts and he's not, paying attention to her, so she starts yelling at him. And he's not paying attention, and she's yelling at him even more. And he's not paying attention, and she's yelling at him even more. And eventually she takes a pot full of water and dumps it all over him. And walks away. And he smiles, careless completely. So the student asks their teacher, teach us. Well, why are you laughing? He says, I prepared myself. How did I prepare myself, you ask? I knew that after the thunder comes the rain. In so many words, I knew that this is what's going to end up happening. So this is the way that I reacted. Now, of course, this is a cute story, but it doesn't really work in real life. Why? Because number one, she's still angry. Two, you didn't solve the problem. All you showed is the fact that you could simply smile at somebody pouring water on you. But if she poured cholent on you, or if she threw something at you, or she ended up leaving you, you wouldn't necessarily smile or laugh and think of it as a funny little thing. But nonetheless, this is the way of the world, trying to solve the problem with human logic. Human logic, of course, is not going to be able to solve these problems because human logic is the reason we have these problems. Hence the reason why we listen to our sages that are giving us divine logic. And the main thing that we see from the Chazon Ish is that he's giving us an extraordinary insight, a novel idea, which is that you actually use Halacha, use the law itself to help you become patient, to help you become quick, to react, and the opposite of lethargic, to help you become such a person that is able, capable, and even at one point willing to accept the insults by others. And there's a few stories about the Chazon Ish himself, where how, as a process of himself working on himself, he had to deal with different things that other people, whether it be students or different people that were in the community, saw it and literally were enamored by this giant of a character, giant of a person that is living among them. Now, of course, in those days, they didn't have the social media that we have today, or the journalists that are ruining the world, or any of these other things. In those days, if you knew a person, you asked their name. That's how you knew who they were. Even if somebody was a Gdol Ador, a big giant rabbi, he could walk right next to you, sit right next to you in shul. You wouldn't know it for 15 years, unless you literally asked about it. So when the Chazon Ish moved to Eretz Yisrael, of course, many people did not know who he was. They didn't see. They heard about him, but they didn't know who he was when they would see him. And one of the B'tei Knesset that he went to, the first one that he went to, was known to have a very difficult person run the shul, a gabai, the guy that's managing the shul, a very difficult older man that's simply, one of these people that is just upset about everything. So this gabai sees this older man, Chazon Ish, walking into the shul, and he's early for prayer, and like a typical Talmid Chacham, he's never going to waste any time. Instead of just sitting there doing nothing, what does he do? He goes to the library and he grabs one of the books. Now this Gabai just fixed all the books, and he sees this older man taking the books. He goes, "Hey, what are you doing? No, come on, you delusional old man. You can't read these things. You're not at that level. What do you, just give me more work." And he yells at him. Chazon Ish quietly takes the book, returns it back to where it is, and takes a seat. Now later on that night, as the prayer went on, the Gabai tells the Keilah that, listen, there is a cause that we need to raise money for, and we're asking everybody in the community to please help us. And he goes from one person to another. What can you contribute? What can you contribute? And the Chazon Ish gives him a big bill. A bill that was a significant amount of money. And from that day on, that Gabai would bring him the book. Without the Chazon Ish ever asking. And this, the Chazon Ish says, was how I took revenge. How I took revenge against the person that embarrassed me. Now, of course, to us, this is not revenge. This is a giant holiness. Who could possibly do such a thing? But that's actually what's expected of us. Typical reaction of a person is, oh, he insulted me. Why don't I just tell him, I'm the Chazon Ish, do you know who I am? I'm Gdol Ador, I wrote so many books, everybody comes to me for blessings, everybody asks me questions, the entire generation is on my shoulders. I can easily tell him that. But instead, sat there quietly and in fact gave him more money than other members in the community. Why? To turn his heart around. Because that's what moved that person. Another time, there was a doctor that told the Chazon Ish that his toiling in Torah for endless amount of hours, 20 hours a day, was certainly good for his neshama, but his body needed some exercise. So he needs to walk for at least a half hour a day. Walk, because his heart became very weak. So the Chazon Ish starts walking. And he walks, and this old man, different old man, sees this religious man walking. And then he walks back. And he walks again. And the old man is looking at him like, why does he keep walking here? And he starts yelling at him, hey, stop wasting so much time. At least read some Tehillim. Keep walking. Read something, do something at least useful. Read some Psalms. Chazon Ish doesn't respond. But from that day on, he tried taking on a different path. But he had a book of Tehillim with him. And he would read the Tehillim. It wasn't much longer after where this old man needed some help. Needed some blessings. And one of his friends told him, listen, you should go to the Gdol Ador, you should go to the biggest rabbi of our generation that's living among us, go to the Chazon Ish. He says, where's the Chazon Ish? He says, in Bnei Brak. Oh, okay, it's not far away from here. Okay, so the guy gets over there, and he gets to the house of the Chazon Ish, and he sees the Chazon Ish outside. He says, oh, you're in line also to go see the rabbi? And the Chazon Ish says, no, I live here. He says, wait, you're the Chazon Ish? He says, yes. Oh, no. Oh, I'm so sorry. I yelled at you. I told you to do Tehillim, and I didn't know it was you. And Chazon Ish looks at him with a big smile and says, no, why? Why are you sorry? It was a great idea. I took it to heart. From that day on, I started reading Tehillim every day for a half hour. Thank you very much for the idea. Now, of course, the average person thinks, the reality is, this requires an enormous amount of work, of self-improvement, of character development. But again, it is certainly possible by each and every single one of us if we want it bad enough. If a person wants to be good, they certainly can become good. But if a person already views themselves as good, then needless to say, they are on their way to becoming Esav nonetheless. Nothing less than being Esav. Because if a person already thinks of themselves as perfectly good, they're certainly on a bad path. Because every single person has something to work on. But if a person views themselves as if there's nothing wrong with them and there's nothing to work on, certainly there's something missing. They don't know enough to know that they have a disease, which makes their disease even more dangerous than it is for others. So a person needs to know that the process of character development, although it's not an easy one, it certainly is possible. But the solution that the Chazon Ish is giving us is not by holding it inside or hitting a boxing bag, but rather by using Torah. Using Torah, using the Halacha as the divine code, the divine map to operate in your life. For example, somebody is there doing something that would make the typical person, including yourself, angry. And you have to operate in such a fashion where you have to evaluate the case. And again, this may not start this way, but nonetheless, the goal is to view something as, according to the Shulchan Aruch, am I allowed to be angry about this? Now, this is the end goal. This is where a person is supposed to get to. Determining whether they're allowed to be angry, whether they're allowed to be stingy, whether they're allowed to be arrogant, whether they're allowed to do whatever it is that they want to do based on the law itself and not based on the emotions. Because if a person continues to follow their emotions, then needless to say, none of the lectures in a series of 80-something lectures has helped them in any way, shape, or form. But if a person is starting to realize that it's time to use my brain rather than my heart in order to operate in the world, then certainly we are moving forward. So the Torah itself is not a one-way street where it's only going to do one thing for everybody. It's not one size fits all. The Torah is compared to both water and fire. Water, where for those that, for example, are angry, they're fiery people, they get upset really quickly, they get offended really quickly. After you learn enough Torah, it's going to cool you down. Where it's going to show you how to use that energy, that fire that you have within you in the right way. To project that fire into your learning, to push yourself even further, to study further. To project that fire to encourage other people. So that Torah will be water for you. On the other hand, people that are lazy, slow, lethargic, you have to check their pulse once in a while just to check they're still alive. If they study enough Torah, that Torah is supposed to put some fire in them. To get them to become much more enthusiastic, much more excited, much more alive. Because if a person is literally too fiery, or simply, you have to question whether they're alive or not, certainly one thing you do know is they don't have enough Torah in their life. So this is one of the things that the Chazon Ish is trying to help us get to with this teachings. Now, in this section, in the 9th section, he starts as follows: וקרוב הדבר לומר כי דקדוק הדין היא הדרך היחידה לתיקון המידות. כי בבחינות אחרות המצווה להתרחק מניסיונות, ואין שווה לאדם לחפש ניסיונות כדי להתרגל בתיקון המידות, ואדרבה, חובות המוסריות שלא להיכנס למקום שעלול לבוא לידי ניסיון, כמו שאדם נזהר שלא לעמוד במקום סכנה, כמו שאמרו במסכת שבת דף ל"ב עמוד א', לא יעמוד אדם במקום סכנה, ואם בסכנת הגוף, כן, כל שכן בסכנת הנפש. וגם במידת דרך ארץ כן, שאין נכנסים לעסק בספק השקול, ואין נכנסים לעסק בספק השקול של רווח והפסד בזמן שההפסד הפסד עולם, אף שהרווח רווח עולם. Translation: it may almost be said that careful observance of the law, he's referring to Halacha, the law of the Torah, careful observance of the law is the only way to correct one's character traits. For according to other schools of thought, the mitzvah is to distance oneself from trials, and it's not worthwhile for a person to search for tests in order to accustom himself to correct his character traits. Even more so, it is a moral obligation not to enter a place where one might come to be tested, the same way that a person must be careful not to be in a physically dangerous place, as the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, page 32a says. If this is true for a physical threat, how much more so when it comes to a threat to the soul? It's also the way of the world that one does not start a business in which the chances of success and failure are even, when the failure means eternal loss, even though the gain also stands to be eternal. Up to this section is what we're going to cover today. So we see here that the Chazon Ish gives us a mouthful, gives us some real pointers that we can use if we simply accept the truth for what it is. So long as a person still has faith in the same system that has failed him and society at large for the last several thousand years by using all of the systems that we mentioned before, this is not going to work for them. Because so long as you still think that the psychiatrist, the therapist, your own personal ideas, and other things that are out there are going to be just as effective, perhaps even more effective than what the law is going to be, certainly this is not going to work. Why? This is what we call like a non-starter question, non-starter issue. So long as a person still has faith in the system that has a track record of failure, one after another for thousands of years, that means that person is not ready yet to move forward. But if a person acknowledges that the system that's out there at large is one complete failure, although it has certain parts of it that are good, certain parts of it that are beneficial, to use it at large, to use it as a way of life is certainly not going to work. It's not going to generate a happy marriage. It's not going to generate a happy life. It's not going to make you a better parent. It's not going to make you a better person. It's certainly not going to get you to heaven, and very likely going to get you to Gehinnom, both in this world and the next. Why? Because the system itself of following your emotions is something that is the cause of the problem. So the way that the Chazon Ish is addressing it right off the bat is simply telling us that after you observe all of these other things, you will get to a conclusion that the observance of the law is the only way to correct your traits. Meaning that it doesn't even matter whether you were born religious or not, male, female, young, old, rabbi, student, irrelevant. If you observe the law, you will have a better chance of attaining true happiness for eternity, both for yourself and for those around you, because you'll become a likable person, you'll become a tolerable person, you'll become a holy person even, whereas everything else is not going to help you. All the gurus in the world, all of the coaches in the world, all of the other systems in the world are one big failure. This is the way to win. Now, of course, many people will immediately tell you, no, what are you talking about? I know this guy, he's really good. Oh no, what are you talking about? I read this book, I read this, I read that. Okay, so again, this is why the Chazon Ish is adamant about starting this section with a simple fact. This is the only way to fix it. Now, he's not making a statement for the sake of his benefit. He's not making money out of us listening to him or not. The only one that's benefiting out of this is if we listen. So here he's telling us a simple fact, which is that listening to the law, observing it, is going to be the solution. But now the question comes, how do I know that if I listen to the law, and I'm particular, and I'm listening, and I observe the mitzvot, and I keep Shabbat, and I eat kosher, and I show up to prayer, and I learn Torah every day, and I do all of these different things, how do I know that I passed the test? Meaning, how do I know that I'm no longer the same angry gremlin that I was, before I did this? How do I know I'm no longer stingy? How do I know I'm no longer an adulterer? How do I know my eyes are not one of these things that looks at everything that moves, like some type of predator? How do I know I'm not that person anymore? Certainly, I can't put myself out there to go test it. And that's in essence what the Chazon Ish is saying. Where the other schools of thought are going to tell you to distance yourself from these other things. Why? Because it's not worthwhile for a person to search for a test in order to accustom himself to correct his character traits. Other schools of thought are going to tell you, listen, you are an angry person, stay away from people that make you angry. This is a very logical thing to do. And he's not disagreeing with this. But at the same token, how would I know I'm no longer angry if I'm not in a position to get angry? How do I know I passed the test? How do I know I'm a better person? So, he tells us that, in fact, a person will at some point be put under the gun, be put in a test in order to find out where they really stand. But they could already know where they stand before that. How so? First and foremost, the more you learn Torah, the more you'll end up observing the law. And one of the things you're going to learn is that it's forbidden to you to actually put yourself in the circumstance that would test you knowingly. The Gemara says several things about such a thing. There's a famous Gemara that talks about a person that has two options to go from one point to another point. He wants to go from New York in one of the boroughs, and he wants to go to meet one of his clients. And he has two ways to get from his house to that client. He can go the short way or the long way. The short way is full of prostitution houses and all types of nightclubs. The long way is empty of all of it, and he can get there, but unfortunately it's going to take him double the time, or even triple the time. The Gemara says, what if he went the short way, but he closed his eye the whole way? He didn't look at a single girl. He didn't look at a single picture of immodesty. Nothing. And he arrived at his destination without even a single look of anything inappropriate. What do you think? Now, your average person will say, this person is a tzaddik. He went right next to all the prostitution houses. He went next to all the nightclubs, next to all the billboards, next to all the bars, next to everything. And he didn't even look. This guy's a tzaddik. The Torah says, wicked, not tzaddik. Why? How dare you put yourself in such a test? How dare you put your holy neshama, your soul, at such a test? How did you know you're not going to look? How do you have so much confidence in yourself that you're not going to look? What if you were wrong and you ended up looking and then acting on it and causing a sin that would shake the heavens, that could literally give you Gehinnom for 1,000,000 years? How did you take such a risk? So the Gemara is very, very harsh on people that take unnecessary risks with their souls, because that clearly shows that they do not value the gift of life, the gift of eternity, the gift of Torah instructions and the manual for life that God gave them. But what about the fact that the other way is much longer? Let it be longer, but still sinless. Let it be longer, but still safe. So this is what the Chazon Ish is saying here, that certainly the Torah tells us, the Gemara Masechet Shabbat says in page 32, that a person must not put themselves in a physical dangerous place, meaning he's not allowed to stand under a broken wall. If you have a broken wall, you can't stand under it. Why? You're putting yourself at risk. Yeah, but, I'll run out of the way. You're not allowed to put yourself at risk. Not physical risk, needless to say, is spiritual risk. And even more so for the spiritual threat. Especially, he says, when a person looks at it from a business perspective. If you have a bunch of money, you got, let's say, $1 million. Somebody comes to you and says, hey, Steve, I got an investment for you. What's the investment? Investment is, you give me the $1 million, I'm going to invest it in xyzbitcoin.com. Okay, what do I get out of it? Well, if everything works out like I expect it to, that $1 million is going to make you the richest man in the world. You could even have Steve Jobs come out of the dead and work for you. You could have the guy from Amazon, Bezos, he's going to clean your carpets, because if this investment works, you're going to be worth $10 trillion. Okay, I like that. What about the downside? Oh, the downside is you'll lose every single penny and you'll go to jail for about 30 years. Now, a normal person will immediately end the conversation there, end the relationship with this crazy friend of his, and simply go on their way with their $1 million still in their pocket. Stupid people are going to take the risk. Why? In their imagination, yeah, I know I have this risk of possibly going to jail and possibly losing all of it, but the upside is so big. I mean, I could become the richest man in the world in one shot. Whenever am I going to get a chance to become the richest man in the world? Well, you're probably going to be broke one way or the other with that kind of logic. But that's what the Chazon Ish is saying to us. When a person puts their soul at risk, they're simply putting everything on a line. Everything on a line. And without even realizing it, they're even in a more of a risk than this example we just gave. Now, the Chazon Ish says that a person needs to truly understand what is the Torah, the value of Torah, in order to utilize it to its full potential. And the way that a person will know that is by learning Torah, especially when they learn Halacha, when they learn Divrei Chokhmah, which is Gemara, when they learn the intricate details of the Torah and they toil over it, not just do it on the side whenever they get a chance, not just listen to a shiur and just get everything spoon-fed to them, but literally toil in Torah for an extended period of time and apply those things to their life, then they're going to actually benefit in learning what Torah is little by little and get to a point of building themselves as a character. But so long as a person puts their own ideas, their own logic, their own agenda as something that's superior to the Torah, they're not going to benefit very much from the Torah. And in fact, the Torah can turn into a poison for those people. Because sometimes people will learn Torah, and we've learned this together already in the series of Pirkei Avot and the series of the Gaon Mivilna, and multiple series is we talked about how arrogance is one of the three things that removes a person from this world. So there are certainly people that will learn Torah, but it would actually make them worse people. Because instead of learning Torah and applying it to their life, they're learning Torah like they learn some type of history book or some type of a mathematical equation where they now think, oh, now I'm just a more knowledgeable version of the same person that I already was. And this, of course, is a disaster. And this is what happened to Yerovam. This is what happened to Doeg. This is what happened to some of the worst people in history, throughout history. Now, if a person is not going to utilize the Torah the right way, that means that they could continue learning Torah, they could continue learning the laws, continue learning the details, but still stay the same animal that they were. And in fact, there are multiple examples of that in society that are not new to the Torah. Recently, I heard the terrible news that this is the first time I've ever heard of such a thing. Apparently, it's at least the second time this happened. And unfortunately, I believe maybe more than twice. But apparently, in the last few months, there's been a change of behavior in American Judaism, unlike any other time in the history of American Judaism. Well, one of the main things that everyone held as the crown of jewel for American Judaism is the Judaism built by Rabbi Yaron Kotler, Alav Shalom, one of the giants among giants, that was part of the pioneers of American Judaism. And he built the Lakewood community. It wasn't just a Lakewood Yeshiva. It wasn't just a Lakewood Kollel. It wasn't just a Lakewood Bedin. It was literally a community, a holy community full of Torah, full of Kedusha, and certainly it still has that. But apparently something is wrong in the water, across the board, all over the world, not just there. And recently Hashem showed us some examples of that. Somebody showed me a video where there was a bunch of little kids, little Jewish kids with little tzitziot and a kippah, go to an American mall and watch a bunch of goyim, women and men, dance for Christmas, for their idol worship holiday. Jewish kids with little kippah and tzitzit are in a mall watching men and women dance for Christmas. And they have a bunch of people with costumes as if this is okay. Now, of course, most people will not think too much of this. But if you insert this poison into that little kid, then the following story is what eventually becomes possible. Because the Chukos Hagoyim, the laws of the Gentiles, is not just something that's not good for us socially. It's not good for us even more so spiritually, because it poisons the neshama. So little kids like that may not realize there's an effect. Their parents certainly don't realize there's a negative effect. But when you hear that a yeshiva in Lakewood, one of the holiest places on planet Earth, just had two young bachurim, teenagers, 14, 15 years old, 16 years old, get into a fight in the yeshiva, and one of the kids takes out a knife and stabs the other. Now, I grew up in public school. I grew up a bunch of thugs, a bunch of gangsters, a bunch of people that would use a gun just for fun, would use a knife just to get back at you, slice your face, slice your back, do a few things to give you a nice accounting to show you where they're from and where you're from and whether you're a blood or you're a crip or you're a this or you're that or you're a gangster or want a gangster or a wankster, all types of other things. I grew up around those people, so to hear that somebody had a gun and somebody got shot and somebody got stabbed, that's where I grew up with. But you see, I grew up among the hoodlums. I grew up among people that this is what they do. I didn't grow up among yeshiva bachurim, rabbis, holy people. I grew up around people that this is their behavior. They're literally no different than the jungle where it's survival of the fittest. It's simply the anaconda snake against the lion. Let's see who wins. But when you hear the same exact behavior is now poisoning our communities, where you have two young bachurim fight, but not just fight the same way as what we have in public schools, that you now have to consider putting metal detectors in the yeshiva just to make sure the kids don't bring weapons. You have to think whether this next fight is just going to be another kid fight where one of them gets a bloody nose and the other one says, I'm sorry, and reads Tehillim for him for a week because he punched his kippah off. Or it's really going to be like the stuff that's across the street in the bad neighborhoods, in the neighborhoods that parents don't really think too much of. You see, Rabotai, if the laws of the Goyim have infected us to such an extent that our yeshivot are now having stabbings, even if it's 2 stories, it's already too much. It's already too much. Why? This was not an halachic debate. This was not Shmaya and Avtalyon. This was not Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel. This is 2 bachurim getting into a fight and stabbing each other. How does this belong to our nation? Now, of course, this is not the first time. This is something that has poisoned our people throughout history, and the sages knew about it. It all has to do with character development, and needless to say, character flaws. When you don't teach Mussar like you're supposed to, then this is the outcome. And one of the proofs is the behavior. The Gemara in the Yerushalmi, Masechet Megillah, in the first Perek, Halacha 10, says that the Kohen Gadol prepares for Yom Kippur. This is the big day. In the world of the Goyim, this is the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Stanley Cup all in one day. This is the big day. The entire nation is awaiting the Kohen Gadol to go into the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies. Do the service that he needs to in there with a pure mind that he cannot even think about his wife in there. He cannot think about anything foreign during the moment that he's inside the Kodesh Kodashim. Come out and let everyone know the good news that our prayers have been accepted. Now this Kohen has to go through a preparation process. Anyone that wants to learn it could look at the Gemara in the Bavli, Masechet Yomah, or you could look at the Yerushalmi multiple places. But needless to say, this Kohen Gadol has to be separated from his wife. He has to live at the Bet HaMikdash. He has to go through a process. In fact, he's not even allowed to wear shoes or go to sleep the night before, so his feet stay cold on the floor so he can stay awake. Now, things can happen where the Gemara says he can become impure, where something would happen, not to his choice, but Keri can come out of him. Goes to sleep, Keri comes out of him, he becomes tameh, he cannot be. The seed comes out of his body while he's sleeping, while something happened, and he is impure, he cannot be the Kohen Gadol. This is why the Chachamim made sure that there is a backup Kohen. A backup Kohen also in the Bet HaMikdash. Each one of them has a separate room where they eat and they drink and they pray and they learn and everything is there. So the Gemara then asks, why don't you just put both of these Kohanim in the same room? I mean, there's plenty of room. Why don't you just put them in the same room? The Gemara says the following. No possible way for us to do that without it leading to spilled blood. What? Spilled blood? Yes. If the Kohen Gadol becomes impure, he can no longer do the service on Yom Kippur, and the second Kohen Gadol is taking his place. There is no doubt in our minds, the Gemara says. There is no doubt. It is an absolute certainty, if you will, that he will murder him that night. Why? There is no way that he can handle seeing this other person benefit from his trouble. Now, you're thinking, Kohen Gadol, he has the vest, he has the jewels, he has the everything. He has Hashem's name. He has the everything you could possibly imagine to literally elevate him above the rest of the nation. He had 8 pieces of clothes that if he doesn't serve with them, his servitude is not good. If he serves with 7 pieces of clothes, he forgets one of them in the bag, in the room, it's no good. If he doesn't wash his hands and feet, it's no good. If he's impure and he serves, death penalty. I mean, he has to be absolutely perfect. He has to be well learned. He has to be a tzaddik. He has to have a pure mind when he goes to the Kodesh Kodashim. He has to be able to have a pure mind, because if he doesn't, he's going to die inside there. That same righteous tzaddik, the Gemara says, will murder the other Kohen Gadol. that's taking his place. Because there's no way that he could overcome it. So when you hear that a yeshiva bachur murders another kid, according to the Torah, it's not a surprise. But the reality is it's not the same circumstance. Here's a flaw of character traits. Here's a flaw of character traits. There's obviously a significant difference between the Kohen Gadol and these two young boys of the first story or the other story, or any other story that exists out there. But the reality is that we can learn a lot from this. That a person that does not have developed their character traits with the proper Mussar teachings could literally turn from what they are to a complete murderer if you simply press the right button. Now, this, Rabotai, is not something that is easy to say, but rather it's a reality that each and every single one of us has to acknowledge that the evil inclination within us could literally reach that level if we do not control ourselves. Now, the Gemara in Masechet Yevamot, page 121a, has a story where Rabban Gamliel says, I was sitting in a ship and watching across the ocean. There was another ship that I knew that there was a Talmid Chacham in it. Rabbi Akiva was in that ship. And as you would have it, the ship hit something and started sinking. And I'm watching from afar this ship breaking and sinking, and feeling anguish and sorrow for the loss of this Talmid Chacham. When we get to shore, I don't even know what to do. How do you give an esped, a eulogy for such a giant Chacham like Rabbi Akiva? I get to the kollel, I get to the Bet Midrash. What can I possibly say? You can't even bury the body. He's in the ocean. He's swallowed up by the big sea. And lo and behold, Rabbi Akiva himself sits in front of me and starts learning Torah with me. And I say, Akiva, my son, how are you here? What saved you? Rabbi Akiva, first and foremost, shows us that unlike the average person that has even the most minute trauma happen to them, a car almost hit them, somebody ran into them, they got a flat tire, or perhaps maybe they stung themselves with a needle. They have to take off a day off of work, maybe they have to go to the doctor, double check, a psychiatrist. Rabbi Akiva, the ship he was on, sunk. He was on the ship. He sunk with the ship. He survived. And he didn't skip a beat. He went right to kollel. He went to go learn Torah. And he didn't come to the kollel to tell everybody, hey, listen, you're never going to guess what happened. I was on a ship just a few hours ago. It sunk. It broke up. People died. Nightmare. Hell on earth. I survived. I swam all the way here. That's why I'm wet. And I'm here to tell you guys this is what happened. And I got a blessing and I got a... No. He's there. He starts learning Torah. Mind is different. The mind is different. But before he gets too far into the Torah, Rabban Gamliel wants to learn a different type of Torah from him. How did you do it? How are you here? Rabbi Akiva says to him, the ship broke. With the breakage, a piece of wood broke off. I grabbed that piece of wood and I climbed on top of it. And I started floating on the ocean. But there was a lot of waves. And every time a wave came, some of these waves, 5 meters, 10 meters, 20 meters. The waves in the middle of the ocean could be huge. Every time a wave came, I put my head down and passed. And And every time a wave came, I put my head down and I passed. And that's how I survived and got all the way to shore. Rabban Gamliel says, from there we learn, Rabotai Yekarim, from there we learn, when the evil comes to you, whether it's evil people or evil things in the world, put your head down and keep going forward. Put your head down and keep going forward. What does it mean, put your head down and keep going forward? What does it mean, put your head down and keep going forward? What does that mean? What does that mean? Put your head down and keep going forward. Rabbi Meir Shapira Milublin says, Rabbi Akiva says that he had a daf shel sfina. A daf shel sfina, he had like a piece of the ship. Rabbi Meir Shapira Milublin, he was the one that coined the idea, brought the idea of the daf yomi. Says Rabbi Akiva had daf. He had a daf Gemara. He had a mind of Torah. So he knew that the way of Torah is not to fight every single battle that's in front of you. If you can avoid it, avoid it. If it's not necessary, move on. Put your head down and go. But that only a mind of Torah thinks that way. Because the mind of the average person thinks of whatever trouble is in front of me, I must deal with. The wife is yelling, I must deal with it. The kids are crying, I must deal with it. The boss is complaining, I must deal with it. Customers, I have to deal with it. Traffic, I have to complain about the traffic. Yes, no, like as if 1.5 million other people are not honking the horn. The government just did this. I have to deal with it. The president just said that. I have to say something. Some guy said this. I have to say something. Everybody has to say something. And they deal with everything. And what ends up happening is the person consumes themselves with the world's troubles, most of which have nothing to do with him. Why? Because his mind is absent of Torah. Rabbi Meir Shapira Milublin says, had his mind had a daf Gemara, had his mind had Torah in his mind, he would not deal with the world's problems. He would not care that these people say this and that people says that, unless it's a problem he must deal with. He's not going to fight every single battle. He's only going to fight the necessary ones, the ones that are necessary, the ones that you cannot avoid. And most things you can avoid. Most things you don't need to deal with. And there lies the question. Which trouble do you want? Do you want the troubles of society? What's happening on Twitter and the New York Times and CNN and the US government and the war in the Middle East and what's happening in Afghanistan and the trouble in Africa and what's happening with the homosexuals in Canada and whether they're friends with the homosexuals in Tel Aviv and the demented people in Mexico and the crazy people in Germany and this and that and your neighborhood and the board of directors for your building and your community and whether the gate works and whether the laundromat did your clothes the right way and whether the food is hot when you got it and whether the drink is cold enough when you drank it and whether your stomach really digested everything and whether your eyes see the same way they saw yesterday and whether your glasses are really perfect and they look good on your face or maybe perhaps you need to get a different one and whether your shoes are new enough and fresh enough or perhaps you need to renew them or perhaps you need to get a different bag because this one is last year's fashion and whether your pants are tight enough or loose enough or whether this or that. All of the troubles of the world, and this one looked at me that way, and that one said this to me, and this one said that, and that one wasn't nice, and this one said that one, and this one thought that, and I think he thinks this about me, and I think she thinks that about me. But I'm not really sure because I can't really read their mind, but if I was them, that's what I would think. And all of the crazy thoughts that the evil inclination puts in an empty mind that does not have any Torah whatsoever. Hence the reason why people spend their lives on TikTok and Twitter and Facebook and social media and reading the news and watching the news and being politicians even though that's not their profession, and they literally have zero in their heads other than troubles. Troubles that don't even belong to them. Troubles they literally buy for free, but ruin their lives in the process. You either want that, or you want to replace it with Torah. Because if you learn Torah, none of those troubles are part of your life, unless they affect your life. Because there's no time for anything else. There's no time for anything else other than what affects your life. There's no time for what the politician said. There's no time for the speculation of the economy. There's no time for what's going on everywhere and what he or they think. There's no time for any of that. The only thing you have time for is what does Abaye mean when he says this to Rava? And what does Rabbi Akiva mean when he said that to Rabban Gamliel? What are they saying? How can I apply what they said 2,000 years ago to my life today? How can I become a better Jew? How, Ribono Shel Olam? And you go through another page, and you go through another halacha, and you go through another daf, and you go through more learnings until you have perfected yourself just a little bit more. And you've occupied your mind with as much Torah as humanly possible in the process. Hence the reason why the world at large simply doesn't exist. Because there's no time for it. There's no time for it. There was a young student that came to Rav Shach. Rav Shach was one of the giants among giants, both as a young boy and, of course, as one of the Gdolei Ador, the head of Yeshivat Ponovich. Rav Shach made sacrifices for the Torah that are simply unbelievable to people of this generation. At the age of 11, he left his family to go learn Torah during the war. Poverty, famine did not bother him. He would not quit learning Torah. After World War I, the countries changed. Where he went to yeshiva was no longer owned by the same country. So he was on a different side of the border as his family, so he couldn't see his family because you weren't allowed to cross the border. His mom, after many months, she wanted to see her son. And it happened to be that our neighbor, her son was in the same yeshiva. And they found out that there is a place near the border that you can see each other. So they sent a letter to the two boys in the yeshiva asking them to come meet at this space. The letter went back confirmation, and they went to meet on that day. As they got to the border, Rav Shach's mother is waiting to see her 11-year-old boy. But she only sees his friend. And she's looking for him. Where's my son? Where's Lazer? Here you go, ma'am. He gives her a letter, the boy. She opens the letter, and the letter is from her little boy, Lazer. Dear Ima, I miss you so much and I love you. And that's why I can't come see you. Because I know that if I came to see you, it would make me miss you even more. It most likely will cause me to come back home. But I need to learn Torah. So I thought it would be best for both of us if I stay at the yeshiva and continue to learn Torah. Because I know in the end, that's what's going to make you happy. As Ima cried, she wants to see her son. She never knew this about her son. She knew he loved Torah, but she never knew to what extent. That this very same Lazer became Rav Elazar Menachem Shach, one of the Gdolei Ador. And he has a little boy come to him, asking him questions, telling him about his troubles. He tells the young man, sit next to me. We're going to have a bunch of people come here, ask me questions. I want you to learn from that. Over 100 people come. Each one with their own troubles. This one, tough time with parnasa. That one, issues with health. That one, tough learning. This one, tough this, tough. Everybody has their troubles. And Rav Shach solves their problems with a few words of wisdom from the Holy Torah in a matter of seconds. One after another. And the boy that's sitting next to him in the beginning is not comfortable hearing everybody's troubles. But Rav Shach says, no, sit, I want you to learn. After all 100 people go through it, Rav Shach looks at the boy and he says, you know what the common problem among all of those people is? He says, no, Kvod Rav, what? He says, none of them know 5 or 10 pages of Gemara by heart. That's the common problem. Because had they known 5 or 10 pages of Gemara by heart, the troubles that they have would not exist. There wouldn't be room for it. There wouldn't be time for it. There wouldn't be a consideration for it. And from there we learn that if a person occupies themselves with the Holy Torah, they no longer have time for these troubles. And that's what the Mishnah in Masechet Avot promises us from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that a person that takes on themselves the burden of Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes from them the burdens of the world. It doesn't mean that their life doesn't have difficulties. It simply means that those difficulties do not stop them from their number one priority, which is learning Torah. It doesn't affect their mind that's occupied with Torah, that's full of Torah. You see, one of the extraordinary things that we see here is the very same halacha that the Rambam told us 800 years ago in Ilchot Issurei Biah, chapter 22, the first halacha. And he tells us about people that have thoughts of immorality, thinking about inappropriate people, inappropriate women, men, and whatever other filthy thoughts enter the mind of a person. He says, those thoughts only enter the mind that is absent of Torah. Because had this person had Torah in their mind, there wouldn't be any room for thoughts of immorality. If you're thinking about immodest things, if you're thinking about promiscuous things, if you're thinking about inappropriate things, the solution is the cause of your problem. Meaning that the solution is you don't have Torah and you need to learn more. The problem is you don't have Torah and you need to have more. You see, what the Chazon Ish is trying to tell us is that the only solution to the flaws that we have in our life is Torah. Not because it's his own unique theory. It is Torah Misinai. It is the law of the land. It is the law of God. This is what we have as an instruction set to live in this world. Now, of course, the average person that does not have enough Torah in their life is going to have a tough time accepting this. Why? Because they see that the Torah has all types of stories that are perhaps hard to believe, all types of laws that seem like they're outdated, all types of things that perhaps are difficult for them to really accept upon themselves. And there lies the problem. When a person considers themselves superior to the Torah, superior to the sages that taught it, superior to the opinion of the divine, thinking that perhaps there's a better way. But why don't you look at the track record over the last several thousand years? Has anyone come up with a better way? Anyone that looks hard enough will have a confirmation that no. No one has ever been happier than the Torah scholars. No one has ever been more successful than the Torah scholars. No one has ever entered Gan Eden other than Torah scholars. The happiest people in this world are certainly also the happiest people in the next world. Those people that look happy because they have possessions or they're fulfilling their lusts, anyone that followed their life sees that their end wasn't necessarily what their climax was. Their truth wasn't necessarily what they presented to the world. Many people look rich, many people look successful, but when you look behind the curtains, you see failure, trauma, and disaster. Whereas when you look into the lives of the holy sages, when you look at the lives of the tzaddikim, the chasidim, the ones that are dedicated to God, There is where you're going to find a purposeful life. That's where you're going to find people that are not bothered by the world's problems unless the world's problems become their problems. And quite frankly, most of the world's problems are not going to ever become your problems. But yet people are going to continue going to watch the news tomorrow and even later on today just to see. Maybe they can get a head start on the disasters that are going to be reported tomorrow. As if they can fix it. As if their opinion about it is going to change it. You see, Rabotai, one of the greatest things that we have from the Torah is we have a manual with multiple examples of how well this system works. We have what the Chazon Ish is teaching us. Then we have Rabbi Akiva and Rabban Gamliel telling us how this worked in their life. Then we have Rabbi Shapira Milublin explaining to us how you could apply yourself in your level. Needless to say, we have a Halacha from the Ramban that tells us this is exactly how it's supposed to work. But if that's not enough, you could simply look at this week's parasha. Parshah Vayeishev. Everything is always in the parasha. That's what makes the Torah divine. Yosef HaTzaddik is abused by his brothers. Although he is a wonderful young man. Tzaddik, Ta'or, Kadosh. One of the few people that has coined the name Tzaddik. Yet his brothers accuse him of wrongdoing. They think that he's trying to kill them. They think that he's trying to steal the kinghood. Certainly they think wrong, but nonetheless, that's how they paskin. They almost kill him. They sell him. What it would appear to be that they ruin his life. Not only doesn't see his family, his father, his mother for 20 plus years. He's thrown in a hole. Then he's sold somewhere else. Then he goes in jail for 12 years. It seems like it's never going to end. But yet, what we'll find out in 2 weeks is that when he sees his brothers, after the test confirms that they have changed, he loves them, he accepts them, he tells them it wasn't you, it was God that did it. He gives them money, he gives them good positions, he cares for them for the rest of their lives. How? How did it not bother you? How did you still have the face to smile to these very same people? Needless to say, how did you have the smile on your face while you were inside the hole in jail? Because the only way you were able to interpret those dreams is through divine inspiration. And divine inspiration does not go upon the person that's depressed. Meaning that inside the hole of hell that Yosef HaTzaddik was in for 12 years, he was as happy as anybody else can possibly imagine. How are you still happy? You just got sold by your brothers. You almost got killed by them. How are you still happy? You were accused for things you didn't do. How are you still happy? You were in jail. How are you still happy? How are you so happy after you see the very same people that brought you to this, so much so that you say to them, I love you, and you cry with them, and you give them, and you help them for the rest of their life? How? The Torah tells us. Yosef HaTzaddik was a special boy. What a special boy. He was the smartest of all of them. He was Talmid Chacham. And he studied Torah with Yaakov Avinu, with his father, each and every single day. Hence the reason why when Yaakov heard that his son, Yosef, is still alive, he didn't believe it until the brother says, yeah, but the carriages are outside. What does the carriages have anything to do with Yosef being alive? If there wasn't carriages, there are carriages. How does that make any difference? The carriages had the sign from Yosef to his father. Abba, it's not just I'm physically alive. I'm alive spiritually. Remember that last shiur that we did 20 plus years ago about Para Aduma, about the red heifer? That picture of the red heifer is on the carriages. to show you I still remember the shiur from 20 years ago. Because I was going over it for the last 20 years. Learning and delving into the Torah that you taught me throughout all the years we were together. I'm not only alive physically, I'm alive spiritually. Hence the reason how Yosef HaTzaddik was happy the whole time. Despite the troubles, despite the agony, despite the pain that would literally destroy every single one of us in a second. He's as happy as can be because his mind is full of Torah. You see, Rabotai Karim, if a person simply gives the Torah a chance to truly save their life, they'll never regret it. But that chance is not just like you give a chance to a date. It's not a chance like you give this food to taste it. A chance meaning you put everything into it without looking back. And you'll see how it transforms your life. And the only thing that gets in the way of a person getting to that happy place, getting to that success, getting to that mindset that is now capable of overcoming their anger, overcoming their stinginess, overcoming all of their bad traits, is the one trait of arrogance that overcomes them all, that tells them, maybe I have a better idea than the Torah. Maybe there's something that I have that's perhaps better than the Torah. Maybe I don't have to believe what the rabbi says, and I could just make my own idea. That little bit of arrogance, says the Mishnah in Masechet Avot, takes a person out of this world. You see, the problem is, people have no concept of what a Talmid Chacham is and what even the Torah is. But yet they're quick to judge and assume that they know more than the rabbi, they know more than a Talmid Chacham, they know more than a Torah even. Oh, come on, you're gonna believe these stories that it says by the sages about the fire and the salamandra and the this and the that. Come on, those are, parables. Those are like fairy tales. The only thing that is your ego getting in the way as a result of you not realizing that you don't know as much as you think you do. You see, if you tell a person, how much is a day in seconds? They're going to tell you 86,400 seconds. Good. Google did a good job. How much is a million seconds? After a Google search, let's say 11 days. A million seconds. Psh. Million seconds, 11 days. Now, if I ask you, is a billion a lot? You say yes, but how much is a lot? Can you fathom a lot? If you compare a billion to a million, can you comprehend the difference between them? They're going to tell you, of course, what's a billion? It's 1,000 millions. What's the big deal? Okay. Without looking on Google, if 86,400 seconds is 1 day, and 1 million seconds is 11 days, how much is a billion seconds? Now, your average person is going to be so far away from this real answer that hopefully it will bring their arrogance a little lower to make them realize perhaps you don't know as much as you think you do. Because to an average person, they're going to do, so let's try. Without a calculator, without Google doing the work for me, let's figure it out. 86,000 is 1 day. That's a lot. 86,000 is a big number. A million is a really big number. That's not that far away from 86,000. So figure that's 11 days. So a billion times 11. So you probably have, I don't know, what is like a year? 2 years. How about 31.7 years? 31.7 years. A billion seconds, 31.7 years. Now, the average human mind cannot fathom not only the value of a billion seconds, but needless to say, how big the difference is between a million and a billion. Needless to say, the average person cannot fathom the difference between them and a Talmid Chacham of this generation. When they think of their flaws and their lusts and their desires and them looking at everything and feeling everything, they think that the rabbi thinks the same way. Just like Yeshu thought about his rabbi, Yeshua ben Parachia, one of the greatest sages that ever lived. Yeshu HaNotzri thought the same thing about his rabbi, hence the reason why he was put on ban for eternity. The average person today doesn't know much Torah, but yet he thinks that him and the rabbi, there's not much of a separation between us. He's been learning for what, a few more years than me? Okay, so it's not much of a difference. And therefore, when you tell him, okay, so what's the difference between you and, let's say, I don't know, a Rabbi Ovadia? Oh, Rabbi Ovadia, oh, he's a genius. So certainly he knows a lot more than me, but if I learn for the next 20 years, 30 years, I could certainly be like him. And in his imagination, he could actually reach this place. And therefore, he's not far away from thinking that he can reach also the place of the Chafetz Chaim, of the Stipler Gaon, of the Gaon Mivilna, of Rabbi Akiva Iger, of the Arizal, and Rabbi Yosef Karo, and the Rambam. What's the big deal? Why? Because when he heard the Rambam say what he said, he didn't agree with the Rambam. So, in fact, he sometimes has an easier time disagreeing with the Rambam than he has even with his local rabbi, because the Rambam is old. It's 800 years ago. It's not effective. But the truth be told is, as far as your mind is from understanding the difference between a million and a billion seconds, if you multiply that by a billion, it's still not enough to comprehend the difference between you and even Rav Ovadia. And if you multiply that by a billion, it's still not even 1% of the difference between you and Rav Kaduri, Rambam. It's the difference between us is not comprehensible to a human mind. Why? Because you have a mind that's flawed due to its nature. It's not a clear mind. It's not a crisp mind. It's not a mind that's pure of information, and where you see the information, you understand it at face value and what it is, as crystal clear as it is. As soon as we read Torah, our emotions jump at us. Does this agree with me? Do I accept this? Do I want this? This? Immediately the emotions react. Meaning that when we see the information, it's not only we don't have the mental capacity, but we also have our emotional flaws getting in the way. And that's why one of the greatest things that a person can do for themselves is to develop a way to commit themselves to what the law says without asking questions, without going off the grid, without requiring to understand in order to do. Certainly, it's good to ask questions, but only during learning, not during doing. Because if you wait for yourself to understand, you're only going to find out when it's too late. Now, the Gemara in Masechet Bava Metzia, page 85a, has a example of one of the previous sages. A story that your average arrogant person in this generation will have a hard time accepting. But only if they learn enough Torah will they realize that this story, as far-fetched as it may sound to the average arrogant fool, is actually no different than Torah Misinai. Rabbi Zeira was a giant tzaddik who wanted to make sure that he tested himself to see where he stood spiritually. Well, we have to test ourselves based on how we follow halacha. If a person is precise with the halachas that he learns, and he does what he reads, he does what he's supposed to, the more precise he is with following the law, the more he knows that he is overcoming his evil inclination and his character flaws. Rabbi Zeira had a test that perhaps is not even comprehensible to us. In order for him to test himself, he would jump into a burning oven once a month. In those days, the ovens were like a huge room full of fire. And he would go into the oven with the fire in it. If his feet burned, he knew he wasn't righteous enough. He has to do tshuva. If they didn't, that means that he was righteous. And there was no sin that could hurt him. No fire that can hurt him. Now, of course, your average person says, yeah, this is probably like a parable of some kind. It's not. In fact, the Gemara testifies that it's not. The Gemara in Masechet Chayya, at the end of the Masechet, page 27a, says that in the name of Rabbi Abahu, says in the name of Rabbi Elazar, Talmidei Chachamim and or shel Gehinnom sholetet bahen. The fire of Gehinnom does not rule over Torah scholars. Why? Because these Torah scholars create a fire around their neshama that supersedes the fire of Gehinnom. Now, the Gemara then says there is an interesting thing to learn from this also. There's also a physical creature. A physical creature called the salamandra. This salamandra looks like one of these little reptiles that walks around here in Florida. But the salamandra is something that's created inside a volcano. After a 7-year process, salamandra comes out. Now, again, the average person who thinks he knows a few things, can even call himself a rabbi, who does not have emunat chachamim, will immediately go to the solution of saying the story of Rabbi Zeira is not true, it's a parable, no way that he jumped into some oven, he's still made of flesh and blood like us, how could the oven not burn him, needless to say, once a month, maybe to trick, like a circus, chas v'shalom. And of course, this analogy that's being said here in the Gemara Masechet Chayya is also another parable, like it's saying that they are so holy that their fire is like Gehinnom, but they're not going to go to Gehinnom, so how could you really test it? You should go there to test it. But then, what does that have to do with the salamandra? That's throwing some people off. So of course you're going to find some heretic rationalists make fun of the salamandra online and say, oh, you really believe salamandra existed? You really? The Gemara says, yes, salamandra exists. In fact, the salamandra is in our Tanakh. Meaning that if you don't believe it, you're kofel. Needless to say, if you don't believe it's in the Gemara either. The Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin, page 63b, talks about the different types of idolatry that's been around throughout the generations. And one of the forms of idolatry was an idolatry where they would take the children and throw them into the fire. In the book of Kings, talks about King Achaz. He's a wicked king. And he wanted to show the people that he is just like them and he's going to throw his son into the fire. And he took his son, and he's going to throw him into the fire. Kid's going to burn. The problem is, that son is Chizkiyahu. Chizkiyahu, who later becomes one of the holiest people on planet Earth, that causes Am Yisrael to do tshuva. So much so that the Gemara says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu thought to make him Mashiach. So anyone who doesn't know the story would immediately say, oh, so he probably didn't throw him in the fire. You'd be wrong. Achaz threw him into the fire. And the baby burned. But he didn't get affected. Why? Because the Gemara says, his mother, Chizkiyahu's mother, sent one of the servants to go find a salamandra from one of the Chachamim. Find a salamandra. Bring him here. Take the blood of the salamandra and put it on my son. Without the father Achaz knowing. And that's what they did. They put the blood of the salamandra on the little baby Chizkiyahu. And that's why when he threw him into the fire couldn't affect the baby. So you see, Achaz wanted to burn the kid because that was his idolatry. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu already brought a solution, brought a cure to the ailment. And a person that thinks that the story of Rabbi Zeira is too far to reach, too far to believe, is only showing that he didn't learn enough Torah to even know this little tiny story that I gave you guys. Needless to say, this is not even 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of the wisdom of the sages of this generation. Needless to say, the previous ones. But when a person does not want to believe anything that their ego does not agree with, is a person that's not going to be protected by the Torah. Is a person that's not going to become better by the Torah. In fact, it's a person that is very likely to be the one that brings disaster to our communities. The main message that we get from the Chazon Ish today is that yes, there is a solution to all of our problems. Solution to fix our character flaws by following the law. Testing where we stand by simply seeing ourselves and how particular we are about following the law. The more particular you are about following the law, the stronger you've become even without seeing yourself under the fire. And if push comes to shove and Hashem sends you a test, you will see that in real life, so you don't need to go test yourself out. But if you see yourself learning but failing, you're learning Torah, but you're still getting angry like a monster. You're learning, but you're still stingy. You're learning, but you're still having marriage problems. You're learning, but you're still, all of the problems of the past seem to have never left. That means that you're not learning enough to change yourself. Or even if you're learning the right amount of quantity, your ego and bad traits are not allowing you to accept it. So it's as if you're not learning it. When a person learns Torah like they're supposed to, there's no time for trouble. There's no time for the world's headaches. The only time that I have is to learn Torah and deal with the problems that I have to deal with. The problems that are also part of my mission in this world. Yeh Ratzon, may be His will that each and every single one of us chooses Torah for life, because it's the only right way to live. It's the only way to overcome our problems, to fix our marriages, to fix our parenthood, to fix our association with the world at large. But that doesn't mean we become friendly with everyone or go to every wedding and bar mitzvah. In fact, it doesn't even mean that you socialize with people on a regular basis. What it does mean is that when you do, you'll have some Torah to say. And BeEzrat HaShem, it'll be a really good chidush. Thank you for learning with me. BeEzrat HaShem, we will see each other later this week on Tuesday, learning the next series of the Jewish intimacy. And for anyone that wants to join us and contribute to the campaign that we have for the Gehinnom movie, you still have plenty of time to not only help us with this campaign, to publicize this movie, but also position yourself in a place where you can get 100 USBs for each $1,800 you contribute. Even more so, you'll be able to enter this raffle that we'll announce the winner of in the next couple of days, of winning a beautiful talit and a bag and everything else. So you're really a big winner regardless of what ends up happening. Either way, thank you again for learning with me. Any of you that are watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. You can enter the raffle there. Get your friends to subscribe. Get people to learn more and more of this Torah. I know that this Torah helps a lot of people, Baruch Hashem. It helps me, and certainly it could help anybody else. And BeEzrat HaShem, each and every single one of us cares enough about the Holy Torah and about our friends and family and everybody else to at least give them a chance to learn the truth once in their life. So perhaps they could take it in and change their lives. And certainly yours. Baruch Adonai L'Olam. Amen v'amen.
There are no shortcuts. No tricks. No magic. The very cave you fear possesses the cure you seek. Go within. Just know, once you cross that threshold, there is only one way out.
There was a rich family that lived here called the Hetheringtons, and unfortunately, their daughter passed away of a heart attack inside the house. Basically, they were so devastated that they reached out to people claiming to be psychic mediums. They actually weren't psychic mediums. They opened up a total of 11 portals inside this house and invited spirits and entities from all different kinds of dimensions.
Well, I think there are certain pieces of evidence that there is an afterlife.
Resurrection of the dead is affirmed pretty clearly in the Talmud and the Midrash.
To be honest with you, to give this lecture is a nightmare. If it was up to me, I wouldn't. There's going to be some graphic details.
This place is a maze.
That person after death went to a place called Sheol.
This is by far the largest near-death experience study that has ever been conducted.
People go to a place and they experience weird things. And sometimes they actually will see a character of some type. Well, where did that come from?
I don't know why that one chain is swinging back there.
They may describe feeling profoundly peaceful, seeing a bright, warm, welcoming light. Some people describe watching doctors and nurses working on them with incredible accuracy.
Next thing I knew, I was above my body watching the operation.
How long did you feel like you were gone?
I went to a place of timelessness. And so what that means, it could have been a second, could have been 5 minutes. I don't know.
Can you imagine waking up from your sleep and not being able to move?
As I'm lying there, I realized that there's an evil presence next to me.
Do you believe that angels, demons exist?
Holy shit, dude, get out of here! Oh my god, dude!
Strange things keep happening. Bizarre nightmares. As if I'm on fire.
Whoa, what the hell is this? Man, I've got bad chest pain.
Satan's Hollow is what it's called, the portal to hell.
Some people calling it an eye of fire, while others said it looked like the portal to hell opening up.
And the next thing I know, I was outside of my body, looking at my body.
What I'm going to do is called claromancy, the art of throwing lots or throwing bones.
2,000 years of experience, passed down, recorded, of how demons work.
God has them all on a leash, and he lets the leash go enough to let them tempt us, because that's what makes us spiritually stronger.
I'm trying to be as graphic as possible so you understand what we're talking about.
It's your ticket to reality. It's your ticket to freedom. It's your ticket to immortality.
Is there an afterlife? Is there a
It's
God?
the type of information that can keep you away from the Yetzirah.
What happens to us after we die?